My name is Marie-Marthe Gervais. I'm a committee member of the Edward Thomas Fellowship. Today I have the real pleasure to introduce a highly regarded academic, a poet who publishes under the nom de plume of Claude Vancourt, and who is also a translator, namely Professor Vladimir Fisera. We go back many years, as we were colleagues in the 80s at the University of Portsmouth, which was known then as Portsmouth Polytechnic. When Vladimir returned to France to take up a professorship at the Université de Strasbourg, Strasbourg University, we stayed in touch. Being now retired from academia, Vladimir has more time to write poetry. And having been introduced to Edward Thomas's poetry, he decided to translate some of his poems into French. When you visit the Edward Thomas Study Centre, which is located in the Petersfield Museum in Hampshire, when it reopens next year, you may be very surprised to find that although Edward Thomas's poetry has been translated into a number of foreign languages, it has not yet, been translated into French. The well-known aphorism, tradutore traditore, is particularly apposite in the context of poetry translation. And this is why poets themselves are most suited to this task. Vladimir is going to tell us about his enjoyment of translating Edward Thomas, and will read some of his translated poems. Mainly Rain, March, The Gypsy, A Tale, and I think a few others. Over to you, Vladimir, and thank you again for agreeing to participate virtually in this première, the very first Edward Thomas Literary Digital Festival. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. My name is Vladimir Claude Fisera. My pen name as a poet is Claude Vancourt, and I will talk about translating Edward Thomas into French. I was always fond of the sound as well as the meaning of words in different languages. Translating for me is conveying the rhythm of the original language in a way acceptable to the French ear. Translating is not a piece of homework but a labor of love, and most of the time it is a strange alchemy which, when successful, coincides with one's own expression of poetry, introducing into French an English message and rhythm by using the means given to us by the French language. When translating, we have to re-sing, as we say in some languages. We have to trans-sing more than translate. As regards my recent discovery of Edward Thomas, I owe it to my former colleague and friend, Mrs. Marie-Marthe Gervais, who gave me several of his poems and explained to me the importance of all the work which has been done in Petersfield and Steep by your associations devoted to his work. To my knowledge, unfortunately, Thomas was not translated yet into French, except in the bilingual La Pléiade edition, bilingual edition of English poetry. Then I had a look at Boris Ford's New Pelican Guide to English Literature, and was struck by Thomas's fresh impressionistic approach, as we say in French, an approach sur le motif, far from the traditional, the accepted pre-1918 one. I was not familiar with it, and it reminded me of French contemporary modernists, such as Francis Jammes, Louis Broquier, and first and foremost, Apollinaire, or in music, of Eric Satie. Then that was confirmed, again thanks to Marie-Marthe Gervais, when I discovered the book by Matthew Hollis, Edward Thomas's Selected Poems. The first poem I translated and published later in the French poetry magazine, Les Amis de Thalie, is a very short one called A Tale, consisting in 2 stanzas, which I found in Boris Ford's book, which served as a guide for me in this early stage. It's a very short text with no fat whatsoever, and which is not in Matthew Hollis's Edward Thomas Selected Poems book. The first stanza goes like that in English. There once the walls of the ruined cottage stood, the periwinkle crawls with flowers in its hair into the wood. C'est ici que s'élevaient jadis les murs d'une masure ruinée. La pervenche si insinue fleurit jusqu'au cœur des poutres. And the second one, in flowerless hours never will the bank fail, with everlasting flowers on fragments of blue plates to tell the tale. Lors des heures défleuries, son banc aux carreaux bleus des Cathy, avec ses fleurs éternelles, ne manquera pas d'en raconter l'histoire. I didn't try here to make it rhyme, except unconsciously at the beginning of the second stanza. I would not translate word for word, as I would have lost, by so doing, the rhythm of the verse. Rhythm was for me of paramount importance, but of course I had to include all the elements of the content, while trying not to make the text longer or too much longer in French than in English, as it is too often the case. Now let us look at the gypsy, la gitane, selecting the extract which was chosen by Boris Ford. Here, as elsewhere, Ford chooses extracts from the beginning or the end of texts, as they are supposed, probably, to him, to be the richest in content and more dramatic. In his case, he chose the end part. Not even the kneeling ox had eyes like the Romany. That night he peopled for me the hollow wooded land, more dark and wild than the stormiest heavens that I searched and scanned, like a ghost new arrived. The gradations of the dark were like an underworld of death, but for the spark in the gypsy boy's look, in the gypsy boy's black eyes as he played and stamped his tune, over the hills and far away, and a crescent moon. Même le bœuf à genoux n'avait pas les yeux du gitan. Cette nuit, il a peuplé pour moi cette terre creuse et boisée, plus obscure et sauvage que les cieux les plus tempétueux que j'arpentais. Inspectait tel un spectre tard venu. Les gradations du noir étaient comme un sous-bois de la mort, sauf cet éclat dans les yeux de jet du gamin gitan, tandis qu'il jouait son air en tapant du pied. Au-delà des collines, au plus loin, sauf aussi ce croissant de lune. Here also I didn't make it rhyme, and I had to use enjambments, as the French text is always longer. I managed to squeeze in, all the same, the contents at least. The next day text, Rain, is morbid, death-obsessed from beginning to end, and Boris Ford did well to choose its first 3 lines, which are very significant. Rain, midnight rain, nothing but the wild rain, on the bleak hearth and solitude and me, remembering again that I shall die. Pluie, pluie de minuit, rien que la pluie sauvage, sur la hutte obscure et la solitude, et moi, repris par l'idée de ma mort prochaine. In this later poem, written just a year before he died, Thomas abandoned the rhymed verse altogether, although the number of feet is regular, whereas this was not the case in the Gypsy. The poem is very different from the Gypsy, which was more descriptive, realistic, very close to his prose notes, which serves him as a start, and full of humor too. So much so that Matthew Hollis left it out of his compendium, preferring, apparently, more dramatic texts, dealing, for instance, with death, just like in the poem Rain, which we've seen above. As regards the next poem, March, Ford chose, as in the case of the Gypsy, the concluding line, albeit with longer extracts. This 1914 poem has neither rhymes nor a regular number of feet, so unconsciously I chose it, as I felt more at ease with such an approach. I published it along with Rain in a recent issue of the literary journal à l'Index. I tried to make shorter extracts of this concluding bit, but it proved utterly impossible. One has to take the whole package, c'est un tout. I'll give you some extracts all the same. What did the thrushes know? Rain, snow, sleet, hail had kept them quiet as the primroses. Que savaient les grives, pluie, neige? Grêle et grésil les ont fait taire comme les primes verts. They had but an hour to sing. On boughs they sang, on gates, on ground they sang, while they changed perches and while they fought, if they remembered to fight. Elles n'ont eu qu'une heure pour chanter, chanter sur les branches, les portails et les parterres, chanter quand elles changeaient de perche et qu'elles se battaient, quand elles en avaient encore le goût. So earnest were they to pack into that hour their unwilling hoard of song before the moon grew brighter than the clouds. Elle tenait tant à en dire en cette seule heure, la cargaison obligée de ce chant, avant que la lune ne surpasse en éclat les nuages. 'Twas no time for singing merrily, so they could keep of silence, and might they cared not to what they sang or screamed. Il ne s'agissait de chanter simplement, mais de tenir à distance et le silence et la nuit, peu importe ce qu'elle chante ou crie, doux ou enroué, tendre ou roué, tout m'était doux, elle ne pouvait pas se tromper. Whether it was hoarse or sweet or fierce or soft, and to me all was sweet, they could not do wrong. They could do no wrong. Sometimes they knew, I also, while they sang and after. Elle connaissait l'air, moi aussi, à force de l'entendre et au-delà. Not till night had half its stars, and never a cloud was I aware of silence stained with all that hour's song, a silence saying that spring remains, perhaps tomorrow. Elle connaissait l'air, moi aussi, à force de l'entendre et au-delà. Il a fallu que la nuit allume la moitié de ses étoiles, sans un seul nuage, pour que je perçoive ce silence taché par tous les chants de cette heure-là, silence qui disait que le présent est de retour, peut-être demain. As regards Morning Glory, which became Glory when published posthumously, it's partially unrhymed and in irregular verses. Here, unlike Boris Ford, I found more impressive the opening description of nature by itself, before the suffering heart of the protagonist comes center stage. The glory of the beauty of the morning, the cuckoo crying over the untouched dew, the blackbird that has found it, and the dove that tempts me onto something sweeter than love. Glorieuse beauté ce matin, coucou qui pleure la rosée immaculée, merle qui l'a trouvée, colombe qui m'attire vers une chose plus douce que l'amour. White clouds ranged even and fair as new mown hay, the heat, the stir, the sublime vacancy of sky and meadow and forest and my own heart. Nuages blancs bien alignés au cordeau comme du foin fraîchement coupé, chaleur élan, sublime vacuité, du ciel, de la prairie, de la forêt et de mon propre cœur. Let us finish with extracts from the end of the poem Words, which I have just finished translating. They will appear in the next issue of the Revue de Littérature Alsacienne, where I publish my own poems also, and the name of Claude Vancourt, as I do in the other two journals which I've quoted above. The poem itself was written 2 years before Thomas's death. It's a fine meshing on the one hand of nature, i.e. the material dimension of experience, and on the other hand of language itself, which is our only means to express sometimes, adds Thomas, this meeting of the external world and of the human deep self, a rare and miraculous happening reserved to poets. Its name is inspiration. God-sent inspiration, we might say. In these closing verses we find Thomas's true creed, its true ars poetica. You English words. Then I skip some passages. You English words, let me sometimes dance with you, climb, stand perchance, in ecstasy fixed and free, in a rhyme as poets do. Ô vous mots anglais, laissez-moi à l'occasion danser en votre compagnie. Restez quoi, escalader, extasiés, libres et pétrifiés, comme le font les poètes, par une rime emportée. Merci. Thank you.